He wasn't supposed to die that night. Sam Kinison had just gotten clean, just gotten married, and was finally pulling his chaotic life together. But on a lonely desert highway, fate blindsided him. Literally. What he said with his final breath still haunts those who heard it. This is the shocking, untamed, and tragic story of a comedy legend too soon. Accidental Demise. The Sam Kinison story. A preacher's son. Fire and fury from the pulpit. Before Sam Kinison was shouting punchlines into a mic, he was shouting scripture from the pulpit. Born on December 8, 1953, in Yakima, Washington, Samuel Burrell Kinison entered the world with more than just a loud cry. He was born into a deeply religious household, the son of Pentecostal preacher Samuel Earl Kinison. The church wasn't just a place the family visited on Sundays. It was the very foundation of their lives. The Bible was law. Faith wasn't optional. Hell was real, and heaven had to be earned. When Sam was just a toddler, the family relocated to East Peoria, Illinois, a small town where the church was often the only entertainment in town. There, Sam and his three brothers, Richard, Bill, and Kevin, raised in an environment thick with sermons, spiritual warfare, and the looming weight of salvation. Their father preached fire and brimstone from the pulpit with a booming voice, and young Sam watched closely. It was his first exposure to performance, the cadence, the rhythm, the raw emotional energy of a man who believed the devil was always just around the corner. But while the church offered a structure of certainty, Sam's early life was far from stable. When Sam was only 3 years old, he suffered a traumatic brain injury after being hit by a truck while playing in the street. The accident left him in a coma for several days. Some would later speculate that this event, this head injury, was the turning point that altered something deep inside him. A switch flipped. The boy who emerged wasn't quite that. He hadn't lost his voice. He just needed courage. And comedy was waiting. Long before he ever stepped onto a stage at the Comedy Store in L.A., Sam Kinison had already been performing. The pulpit had trained him in ways no open mic ever could. The fire and brimstone theatrics, the rhythm of rising tension and explosive release, the dramatic pauses, all tools he would carry into stand-up. He may have walked away from God, but he never walked away from that pulpit energy. The preacher was about to become a prophet of another kind. Comedy as salvation, from rock bottom to the mic. By the late 1970s, Sam Kinison was a broken man, spiritually, emotionally, and financially. His days as a fire and brimstone preacher had ended not with a scandal, but with something far quieter: disillusionment. His sermons stopped drawing crowds. His marriage had ended in heartbreak, and his bank account, when it existed, was empty. He drifted from town to town, sleeping on couches, floors, and sometimes He had walked away from the church, but nothing else had taken its place. He was a man without a mission. But then, something unexpected happened. His older brother Bill, a veteran of the Houston comedy scene, threw him a lifeline. "Why don't you try stand-up?" he asked one night. Sam scoffed. "Me? Telling jokes?" But Bill saw what others didn't. Sam had always had this presence, this undeniable fire when speaking. The pulpit hadn't just made him a preacher, it had made him a performer. Reluctantly, Sam gave it a shot. He stepped onto a small stage at a Houston open mic night, armed with nothing but bitterness, confusion, and a sharp tongue, and something clicked. The audience laughed. Not politely, not nervously, but hard. The rage that once exploded from a pulpit now detonated as punchlines. His pain became his power. His trauma turned into timing. It wasn't polished. It wasn't safe. But it was real. Stand-up became his salvation. In 1978, Sam moved to Los Angeles with little more than a bag of clothes and big ambition. He crashed on floors, begged for stage time, and slowly clawed his way into the city's legendary comedy circuit. It was a tough crowd. Richard Pryor, Robin Williams, David Letterman, they were all rising. The Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard was the proving ground, and Sam was just another unknown hoping for a break. But Mitzi Shore, the owner of the Comedy Store, saw something unique. She gave Sam a spot. Late nights, the worst slots. But it was something. And more importantly, it was his. Sam became known as part of the Outlaws of Comedy, a group of stand-ups who rejected safe, sitcom-friendly material. His style was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. He didn't just tell jokes, he raged them. He'd scream, stomp, shake the mic stand like it owed him money. He brought preacher's energy to comedy, delivering punchlines like fireballs, shocking the audience into laughter, discomfort, or both. He wasn't just funny. He was dangerous. Beneath the comedy was real agony, but Sam wielded it like a weapon. He didn't hide his scars. He turned them into a brand. It was during this time that Sam developed his now iconic scream, a guttural, throat-tearing wail that punctuated his most outrageous rants. But for the first time in years, Sam had purpose. And in 1984, that purpose found a microphone. He performed on a small HBO special hosted by his friend and mentor, Rodney Dangerfield. His 7-minute set was explosive, raw, vulgar, and unlike anything network television had ever broadcast. Dangerfield called him the future of comedy. The audience gave him a standing ovation. And overnight, the industry took notice. Sam Kinison, the failed preacher who once screamed about sin and salvation, had found a new gospel. And he was just getting started. The rise. From clubs to Carson. For years, Sam Kinison was a ghost in the background of comedy's golden age. While names like Eddie Murphy and George Carlin filled arenas, Sam was still grinding in dark clubs, living gig to gig, mic to mic. But those who saw him live in the early 80s, really saw him, knew they were witnessing something uncontainable. He wasn't trying to entertain an audience. He was trying to exercise something. And the industry was about to take notice. Out in Houston's gritty comedy circuit, what many comics jokingly called the minor leagues, Sam relocated to Los Angeles for one reason: the Comedy Store. Run by Mitzi Shore, it wasn't just a venue, it was the proving ground. From Robin Williams to Jim Carrey, every legend had passed through its doors. But the Comedy Store didn't hand out fame. It handed out pain, dues, and humiliation. Sam embraced it all. He took the graveyard shift, 1 o'clock a.m., 2 o'clock a.m., when the audience was mostly drunk, half asleep, or already gone. But those who stayed witnessed a storm. The ex-preacher turned comic pacing the stage, hair wild, voice rising from a whisper to a scream, eyes filled with fire. He raged about marriage, religion, war, hypocrisy. Nothing was off limits. Some nights he killed. Others he bombed so hard you could hear the ice clinking in cocktail glasses. But it didn't matter. He was building something. And then came Rodney Dangerfield. By 1984, Rodney was already a comedy icon, famous for discovering raw talent. When he visited the Comedy Store one night and saw Sam perform, something clicked. Rodney pulled him aside and said, "You're crazy, but you're something special." A few months later, Rodney invited Sam to appear on his HBO special, Young Comedians, alongside up-and-comers like Bob Saget and Louis Anderson. This was Sam's moment, and he knew it. He took the stage in a rumpled trench coat, looking more like a street preacher than a stand-up comic. And in just a few minutes, he detonated. Jokes about Moses and the Red Sea, screaming breakdowns about relationships, twisted logic that somehow made perfect sense through the madness. The audience laughed, gasped, and applauded. Dangerfield beamed like a proud father. That night didn't just put Sam on the map, it tattooed his name onto it in flaming letters. The buzz was instant. Comedy clubs started calling. Radio stations replayed his HBO set. Magazine interviews followed. His face, flushed red, veins bulging, mouth wide open mid-scream, became an icon. But one man's approval would change everything. Johnny Carson. The Tonight Show was still the pinnacle of success for comedians in the 1980s. If Carson invited you to sit on the couch after your set, your career was made. If he didn't laugh, your career could stall before it started. It was the ultimate risk. In 1985, Sam Kinison took that risk. He stepped onto the Tonight Show stage in front of a national audience, millions of viewers who had never seen a comic like this. There was no blazer, no neat punchlines. Sam brought the scream. He brought the rage. But this time, he sharpened it just enough for late night. The crowd howled. Carson laughed. Sam walked off stage a star. That moment, sitting Johnny Carson in front of America, marked the official beginning of the Kinison era. Within months, he was headlining sold-out shows. Rock stars like Slash and Ozzy Osbourne were calling him a god. He released his first comedy album, Louder Than Hell, in 1986, equal parts sermon and stand-up. He wasn't just telling jokes, he was launching a revolution. But fame is a fast-moving beast. And while Sam Kinison had finally outrun obscurity, something darker was now chasing him. The persona, misogyny, mayhem, and magnetic madness. By the mid-1980s, Sam Kinison wasn't just making people laugh, he was making them squirm. Every performance felt like a sermon from the edge of hell, raw, explosive, and unapologetically offensive. He didn't tiptoe around taboo topics. He charged into them, full scream. The controversy was immediate. Feminist groups called him dangerous. Church leaders accused him of blasphemy. Critics said he was cruel, misogynistic, toxic. But the fans? They couldn't get enough. There was something undeniably magnetic about Sam Kinison. He didn't tell jokes. He detonated them. His signature scream became more than a punchline. It was a primal release, the sound of every broken man who'd ever been heartbroken, cheated, or spiritually gutted. For many, Sam wasn't just funny. He was cathartic, and his fan base reflected that intensity. Rock stars gravitated to him like moths to a flame. Slash from Guns N' Roses, Billy Idol, Ozzy Osbourne. They weren't just fans, they were friends. He partied with Motley Crue, opened for metal bands, and was often introduced on stage not as a comedian, but as a screaming prophet of rage. In a world full of sanitized, sitcom-ready comedians, Sam was chaos incarnate, and for a certain generation, that made him a god. Rolling Stone called him America's wildest comic. He appeared on the covers of magazines with wild hair, open-mouthed, red-faced, and usually holding a microphone like it was a weapon. The '88 comedy album, Have You Seen Me Lately?, earned a Grammy nomination and sold hundreds of thousands of copies. HBO gave him full-length specials, each more unhinged than the last. Audiences showed up in droves. Some came to laugh. Others came just to witness the madness. But behind the wild success was a man unraveling. Fame didn't calm Sam down. It cranked the volume even higher. His personal life was spiraling into chaos. Drugs, especially cocaine, became part of his routine. Booze was a constant companion. He once bragged, "I don't do drugs anymore. I gave them up when the paramedics brought me back." But that was only half the truth. His addictions were accelerating. His temper was growing darker. Friends noticed a shift. Sam was always intense, but now he was paranoid, aggressive, sometimes cruel. Fights broke out backstage. Burned out. He was becoming a caricature of himself, trapped in the persona he had built. Even his relationships followed the same pattern, fast, passionate, and explosive. He dated strippers, models, actresses. Some described him as magnetic and generous. Others used harsher words, manipulative, jealous, emotionally unstable. One ex-girlfriend later said, He could make you laugh so hard you couldn't. But for all the chaos, Sam remained one of the most booked comics in the country. His tours sold out. His face was on billboards. He hosted Saturday Night Live and made guest appearances on Late Night with David Letterman, often walking into thunderous applause. Even Hollywood came calling. He voiced characters, starred in small roles, and had bigger film projects lined up. He was at the peak of his fame. But behind the scenes, Sam was losing control. The lines between the stage version of Sam Kinison and the real man began to blur. He was always on, always pushing the envelope, always teetering on the edge of collapse. The persona, the screaming, raging, no-filter comic, had taken over, and it wouldn't let go. As one friend later put it, he wasn't just playing a wild man, he was a wild man. And wild men don't usually get a happy ending. Sex, drugs, and a microphone. The dark side of success. Sam Kinison had spent years clawing his way out of obscurity, sleeping in cars, bombing at 2 a.m. sets, begging for stage time. But now, in the late 80s, he had it all. Fame, money, and the kind of spotlight most comics would kill for. And it was killing him. With success came excess. Cocaine wasn't just recreational, it was ritual. Booze wasn't a social habit, it was survival. The backstage of a Kinison show looked less like a green room and more like a war zone. Bottles everywhere, women everywhere, drugs in open view, rock music blaring. Sam wasn't just performing anymore, he was living the lifestyle of a rock god. He once joked, "I don't have an addiction, I have a career enhancement program." But the joke wore thin. His body began to show signs of wear, bloated face, unpredictable behavior, slurred speech. He was gaining weight, losing sleep, and lashing out more often, even at friends. His stage persona, once controlled chaos, was tipping into real-life destruction. He developed a feud with comedian Bobcat Goldthwait, calling him a prop comic gimmick and mocking his signature screeching voice. Goldthwait fired back, accusing Sam of being hateful and out of control. The feud spilled onto late-night talk shows and tabloid headlines. But the real tension was with Andrew Dice Clay, another foul-mouthed, controversial comedian with a massive following. Both were loud, aggressive, and unapologetically offensive. But where Dice leaned into machismo and caricature, Sam trafficked in pain and fury. Their egos clashed like titans. Backstage at comedy clubs, they exchanged insults. On air, they undermined each other. The rivalry reached a boiling point when Dice hosted Saturday Night Live in 1990 and publicly distanced himself from Sam, calling him too far gone. Sam's fan base was still growing. His comedy albums were flying off shelves. Louder Than Hell had already gone gold, and his 1988 follow-up, Have You Seen Me Lately, earned him a Grammy nomination. His HBO specials brought in millions of viewers and ticket sales stayed strong. He even performed in sold-out arenas, a rarity for stand-up comics at the time. He had become a cultural lightning rod. Rock stars continued to revere him. He went on tour with Anthrax. Ozzy Osbourne called him one of the most honest motherfuckers I've ever met. Sam even recorded a comedy music single, a screaming, chaotic version of Wild Thing featuring rock legends like Slash and Tommy Lee. The video played on MTV. It was absurd. It was vulgar. It was pure Kinison. But behind the scenes, the machine was breaking down. Friends watched him spiral deeper into addiction. His erratic behavior began alienating allies. Deals fell through. At one show, he stumbled on stage visibly high, forgetting punchlines and berating the audience. Another time, he physically threatened a reporter backstage after being asked about his drug use. Lawsuits followed, some from ex-girlfriends, others from promoters. Still, Sam refused to slow down. He insisted he was fine. He said the chaos was part of the act. But in reality, the boundaries between the act and the addiction had disappeared. By the end of 1990, It was clear that something had to give. Either Sam would crash and burn, or find a way out of the spiral. No one knew which way the story would go. Redemption tour. Clean, married, and hopeful. By the early 1990s, the screaming prophet of comedy had nearly lost his voice, literally and figuratively. Years of cocaine, whiskey, late nights, and emotional tailspins had left Sam Kinison a shell of his former self. In 1992, Sam married Malika Suwiri, a striking, intelligent woman who had been by his side through much of the madness. Their relationship had its storms, like everything in Sam's life, but Malika represented something Sam had rarely experienced: stability. She was calm where he was chaos, measured where he was manic. He cut back on touring. He started eating better. He gained weight, healthy weight. Friends said he was happier, clearer, more present. Even his performances evolved. The scream was still there, but it was more controlled. His jokes took on a new flavor, still cutting, still raw, but with a sense of self-awareness. He didn't just rant about ex-wives anymore. He joked about himself. In interviews, Sam began talking about faith again. Not the fire and brimstone version he once shouted from the pulpit, but something more reflective. It was a full-circle moment. The preacher-turned-comic was now becoming something else entirely. An artist at peace with his contradictions. Hollywood noticed. He landed new acting opportunities. He voiced a cartoon character in Tales from the Crypt. He filmed a role in Savage Dawn and was in talks for a sitcom pilot loosely based on his life. HBO offered him another special. A book deal was on the table. Sam Kinison, once dismissed as a screaming burnout, was making a comeback, on his own terms. He even began mentoring younger comics again, offering brutal but honest advice. To one up-and-coming performer, he said, "Don't be funnier than your demons unless you're ready to fight them." Still, not everything was perfect. Sam remained volatile. He could go from charming to confrontational in a flash. But the edge that once made him dangerous now felt more focused. He had a plan. He had a new life. And on April 4th, 1992, just 6 days before his death, he stood on stage at the Riverside Resort Hotel in Laughlin, Nevada, performing one of the cleanest sets of his career. Backstage, Sam told his crew he was ready for the next chapter. "The wild years are done," he said. "Now I want to see what happens when I actually live my life." They all believed him. So did he. But fate had other plans. The crash, a desert road, a mysterious goodbye. April 10th, 1992. It was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter. Sam Kinison had just gotten married 6 days earlier to a 20-something blonde, exotic dancer-turned-makeup artist who had been with us and was now there for what they both believed would be peace. They were headed to a sold-out show at the Riverside Resort Hotel and Casino in Laughlin, Nevada. His new tour, Sam Kinison, Live from Hell, was off to a strong start. Sober, married, hopeful, Sam Kinison finally seemed to be turning the page. He was driving his white 19. He was semi-conscious, mumbling, then suddenly speaking, clearly, but not to Bill, not to Malika, not to anyone present. He started talking to someone, Bill later told reporters, like he was having a conversation.